Hi guys and welcome to yet another review. This time around I'm bringing you the TANGZU DUFU second stanza. This is the follow-up to the original TANGZU FUDU verse 1. So one is the FUDU, one is the DUFU. And it's the company's 1+2 hybrid. This time around I think they've really gone to town and they've really kind of to a certain extent overdone themselves, especially when you consider that this is a $99 IEM. I mean, and what am I saying with all of this? Well, the original FUDU, had a nice aluminum CNC shelled. The whole thing was CNC machined, a 10mm driver, two custom BAs. It was the first 1+2 from the company, so it was a learning curve. I personally thought that it was a really good IEM, especially when you consider that it's $89 price point. It sounded phenomenal, had a really nice, warm, kind of engaging sound. But of course, as is always the case, there's going to be people that don't appreciate this type of sound, that think that the sound is a little bit overly muffled, it's not audiophile, and I think the main thing here is always to kind of keep this in mind. What was the design premise? To be audiophile correct or to be fun and engaging? Has that premise been achieved? Is the IEM well built? Is the IEM musical? How good is it in terms of its design premise with regards to that? If its design premise is to be technical, is it a technical IEM? If its design premise is to be musical and fun and engaging, is it fun and engaging? And I think that keeping all of those things in mind, the verse one, the FUDU, hit the marks perfectly. I mean, it did what it was supposed to do, and it, in my opinion, did it perfectly, and all of it offered at a price which it was and is still competitive by today's standards. Okay, it's the most similar IEM to this type of sound that we had back then was and is still, because it is still available, the Performer 2, or sorry, the Explorer from Aful. It also shares this type of more warmer type of tonality, more warmer, fuller type of sound. As for the DUFU second stanza, TANGZU has really tried to, I'm not saying correct what they did in the FUDU. I think they just tried to offer another brother, another type of sound following the same kind of philosophy. It's basically got the same shell. However, the shell now is a brass shell, and you feel the weight on it. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of machining, absolutely stunning. um, how they did it at this price point, I really don't know. Brass is not cheap, but the machining and the shell appearance is phenomenal. The faceplate is wood, so again, they've really outdone themselves in terms of the build quality, which isn't something which is out of the common for TANGZU. As for the drivers, they used a specially developed 10mm titanium driver, and again two custom BAs. And then they used, I believe I'm going to say this right, and please apologize, the Key Yao crossover network, which they first implemented in the NESA. And that crossover network, what it does, or what it tries to do, is get the drivers to work in their desired frequency ranges, but at the same time do away with any possible nasties that can have those drivers working at a part of the spectrum or in a manner which might not be the ideal under normal circumstances. And I believe there lies one of the things, or one of the reasons why the stanza, or the DUFU, which way you want to call it, sounds as competent as it does. I mean, I was listening to some Carol Duboc, and I started off by listening to the original, put it on my ears, and very nice, very engaging, very satisfying. Nice. I cannot fault it. I put on the DUFU, and I was like, wow, wow. And what is this wow about? Well, obviously the fact that they've tuned down the bass as compared to the original has opened up the mids completely. And the female vocals on the DUFU, and it's not only Carol Duboc, it's a few others. Um, they are something that has to be heard, honestly. Of course, all of this subjected to your personal tastes and what you ultimately like or don't like. But I mean, Carol Duboc sounds absolutely incredible. Another female vocal that I like listening to quite often, and I think just sounded absolutely incredible, was Sophie Salmani. How it feels, absolutely incredible. Her vocal is spot on. It's as realistic as it can possibly get, I think. Dominic Phil Aim, Some Room to Breathe, and a few other songs that she has as well, incredible. And so I think the first thing that I can give as a takeaway here is, while the original FUDU was an IM that it wanted its sound to be warmer, and maybe that benefited male vocals, and maybe that gave that organic type of sound that some of us like, I like as well, the desired effect that we wanted. The DUFU is kind of the polar opposite. The bringing down of the bass energy in the mid bass, so making that bass be more, well, jumping ahead. The first IM that immediately came to mind when I was listening to the DUFU was the Yume 2, the C Audio Yume 2, and I think that already alone is enough for me to already say how good I think the DUFU is. The Yume 2 was an IM that, because of the way that it was developed, C Audio took a little bit too long, and when it was released too late, and so all the hype that was created over months and months and months was lost, and people never really got to give it its deserved attention. And when when you're dealing with a market like the IEM market, which is so quick, so volatile to a certain extent, you can't afford. If you're going to launch an IEM or you're developing something, then keep quiet, don't talk about it, and then once you have it ready to develop, to launch rather, and you are saying you're going to launch it, make that first say that you're going to launch it to the launch maximum, absolute maximum 2 weeks. And that's not what happened with the C Audio, and it lost its momentum, and it was never, given its deserved glory. And I think the DUFU might, to a certain extent, suffer from the same problem. It is an IM that sounds incredible. Yes, you will have to be careful with the tips. I'm using Divinus Velvets, and that's what I personally recommend. I would say, yes, play around with tips if you want to, but I think that Divinus are the option. I would say as well, play around with cables. Not that cables, I think, ultimately are a monumental game changer, but if you have the chance, play around with them. I think you won't be disappointed by playing around a little bit with cables, and play around with sources. And once you've found that combination that works for you, I think you will be absolutely blown away by how good the DUFU can sound. I'm not going to say that it's now going to sound more competent than IMs costing 2 or 3 times the price, but what I am going to say is that if it does sound as good as the Yume 2, like I just mentioned, I think that alone deserves its attention. It's got, I mean, in terms of, and I'll just break it down now in terms of the bass, the mids, and the treble. Let me just get the graph here so you guys. Okay, there we go. So in terms of the bass, it's got this nice gliding sort of bass. 200 hertz, basically it's flat, so there's no bleeding into the mids. That opens up the sound completely, which was something that in the previous version was not the case. At 200 hertz you still had a lot of energy, and the fact that then the mids to upper mids were also tuned differently, it did make the sound a little bit thicker, a little bit warmer, engaging, entertaining, very fun, but maybe not as audiophile correct as it is here on the DUFU. Now, the thing that really does blow me away here on the DUFU, and again I think it's testament to the drivers, the way that they've coherently matched the drivers and the crossover, is that 100 hertz point that I like, that you guys know that I'm always looking at. It corresponds to about 1.2 kilohertz on the DUFU, and you've got a lot of energy above that, and a reasonable amount of energy below 100. And when I show you the graph, you'll see what I mean. And I don't know what sort of magic they've done here, but the reality is, if this had been a tuning used on a pure planar driver, for example, okay, or used on, for example, and the one IM that comes to mind that had this type of tuning was the Dioko, or you use this on a single dynamic this way, it would be an absolute mess in my opinion. The mids would have been way too forward, it would have been too thin in the bass, it would have just been shouting at you. Maybe at low volumes fine, but it would have been overall a very unengaging type of presentation. With the DUFU, and because I am sure that the BAs are in this part of the spectrum are already, so that 1, 2 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz already in full force there. The energy that you get, and when you look at it visibly in the graph, it seems like a lot. The energy that you get is somehow just perfectly matched to the amount of bass that you have. And the way that the two just come together and sound is absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, I was not expecting it. By looking at this graph, I would never have said that I would have enjoyed the DUFU as much as I did. Honestly, I wouldn't. And and again, sometimes I get asked, but what is your favorite type of tuning, or what is your favorite type of IM? Guys, I like anything as long as it's well done. I will like anything. I recently reviewed the Nightingale Pro 2 from Sivga. By looking at the graph, okay, when you put it in your ears and you start listening to how it sounds, it's magical. It is magic. It sounds incredible. Another IM which blows me away as well in that manner is the FUDUs NE4 4BAs. You look at the graphs and you think, okay, fine. You put it in your ears, you start listening to it, and again, you are blown away. It sounds absolutely incredible. Yes, you already know when you see a graph that looks good that probably, most likely it's going to sound good. So when you see some graphs from some of the stuff from Zigat, from some of the stuff from QE ears, you look at the graph and you're like, okay, this, and true enough, when you put it in your ears, it sounds good. And then there's IMs, and the DUFU is one of those IMs that you look at the graph and you think, okay, this is going to be an interesting one. And then when you listen, you are pleasantly surprised. Now, what will I say to you guys is this. Go to a place that has the IM. Listen to it. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just think that I'm now saying absolute truth. Go to a place. Take your source. If not, take your music at least. Take some tips, play around and listen to it. And I am positive, I am saying this with full conviction, if you are able to get that right combination going, the DUFU will not disappoint. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, bass really well done, it's clean, it's detailed, it's articulate, it's dynamic, it's, everything is there. Mids, clean, forward. Female vocals here are absolutely incredible. Female vocals, instrument in terms of like guitars and up and up from Jeff Ryan, for example, you got that sax. It is a song that can make or break a lot of IMs. I was really impressed with how it did it here on the DUFU. I was not expecting it. Honestly, I was not expecting it. It sounds solid. Rise from Dominic Phil Aim, again, incredible on the DUFU. Raising Venus from Mafia and Boris Blank, really good. But then I took it to the complete opposite end of the stuff, and I took stuff like Blackbird by Lady Blackbird. Sounded incredible. If I went to something again completely different, Have You Ever by Brandy, again, sounded really good. Very versatile. I mean, very versatile. Granted, this will be an IM that it will play more in its element with jazz and vocals and so on and so forth, even though it's got nice energy, and that titanium drive is capable of giving enough slam and dynamic feel to more bass heavy stuff. I don't think that's where you will get the magic of the DUFU ultimately. Okay, so mid-range, although forward and tuned in a very energetic manner, it's well executed, it's great. High frequency, top marks, no harshness, no aggressiveness, no nothing. I honestly just think that the only place where maybe some of you might find a little bit of over energetic area will be there in that 1 to 2 kilohertz, and then maybe in the 5 to 6. And I think those 2 points as well will be very much determined by how they sound to you, by the tip and how deep the IM fits. And that's another thing that I will suggest. Deep fit this. If you just fit it loosely like I initially did with some liqueur tips, no, not good at all. The liqueur tips didn't work really good here. However, when I did change to the liqueur tips, the medium sized, and I was then able to really ram the IM inside, the sound completely changed. And then it changed it out for the velvets, and that's the perfect one. The velvets in my ears with the DUFU are the perfect combination. Technically, detailed retrieval, micro and macro details, incredible resolution, you know, top marks. It resolves very well. Soundstage, it's big. It's a big soundstage. Excellent imaging. Technically, I think it really shines. I believe that the DUFU technically is superior to the previous one. In the FUDU maybe had maybe I would say better timbre and tonality, more realistic timbre and tonality. Here the timbre and tonality can sometimes sound a little bit pushed, a little bit overly done. Not offensive, but that's the only technicality that I wasn't as impressed, contrary to the soundstage and the imaging and the detail retrieval where it shines. It really does shine. And that's basically it. Like I said, this reminded me very much of the Yume2. I would say the Yume2 maybe just a little bit extra bass warmth, but the overall vibe of the sound is very similar, very similar. And I, you know, it's a pity that it's not getting a little bit more attention. I think if it got a little bit more attention and if people were actually able to then just go to the trouble of doing what I just said, I think you would not, or you will not be disappointed. And that's basically it. Let me just quickly show another graphs and we'll wrap it up. Okay, I've placed straight away the two graphs of the FUDU and of the DUFU. The FUDU obviously is the green line, which has more bass, more mid bass definitely, and the low energy here across the mids, upper mids and treble. You can see that 100 Hz point there corresponds to roughly 1.7, but it's flat, so it's definitely a warmer, more organic type of presentation. On the other hand, the DUFU 100 Hz corresponds there to 1.1. okay, the amount of energy that you have across the whole mids, upper mids and treble, you know, it's completely different than what you have here, and also completely different versus the FUDU. But like I said, they've done some special, they've got some special sauce here, because I didn't personally find that it sounded as aggressive or as forward as you might be led to believe by looking at this straight away. Now, granted, and I've repeated this a few times and I'll say it yet again, tip selection, depth insertion of the IM, and source is important and will make or break the sound, definitely. But again, it's not something that you usually don't do on the one hand, and it's not something that you won't quickly find out what works. I would say use something which has got a slightly more warmer tonality in terms of source, so maybe steer away from anything which is ESS based. And in terms of tips, whiteboard definitely, but make sure that whiteboard tip that you use, be it the Venus Velvets, be it the liqueurs, be it the BGVPs, that they are medium size, and that allows you to insert the IM deep. And if you do those, you will be impressed by the sound of DUFU. That's a guarantee. You will be impressed. Having said all of this and having praised the DUFU as I have praised, of course, there's bound to be people that will not like it, that will think that it doesn't sound good, that it's aggressive or this or this, that, but there's nothing I can do. I'm merely stating my opinion. I'm merely giving you my impressions. Anyway, jumping back here to the IMs, these two, as you can see, the difference, they have got kind of the same sort of base premise, but way more energetic on the DUFU versus the FUDU, and less energy here on the bass again. As for the comparisons that I was talking about, or the similarities, this one, the FUDU, is very similar to the Performer, a full Explorer, as you can see. Same sort of vibe, same sort, again, 100 hertz point corresponds there. As you can see, that same sort of warm, more kind of tonality, okay? And as for the DUFU, which is this one here, this is the Yume2. Again, a lot of similarities. The bass very similar. The real difference here is that the Yume2, it's not as forward here in this part of the mids, and that's it. Otherwise, they sound incredibly similar to each other, and I think that is already a good premise on how competent I think the DUFU is. Okay, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions, please feel free to ask me. You take care now. Bye bye.